Okay, hi, good afternoon. Welcome to the School of Advanced Study Digital Humanities workshop on text encoding for ancient and modern literature, languages and history. I'm Gabriel Bodard. This is my colleague Christopher, and we'll be giving you this introductory session on the workshop. If you're watching this live on YouTube, then you also have the possibility of leaving comments in the live chat if there's any questions or anything that needs clarification. If you're watching this at a later event, a later asynchronous version of this workshop, then you don't have that possibility. But as we'll explain to you, there's other ways for you to get in touch with us if you need any help or feedback urgently. So the way this workshop is going to work is we will, on two occasions, today and on Friday, the second workshop is linked on the session page. We will introduce the session. We will explain how the activities are going to work, and that's what we're doing now. We will then give you some references, and those may be videos, they may be articles to read, they may be tutorials to look at. That you will go and have a quick look at, and you will then attempt an exercise that we will have explained to you. And we've assigned, if you're watching this as part of the official School of Advanced Study workshop, we've assigned you to small groups, and we encourage you to discuss this exercise before you attempt it with the other members of your group. You can do that either by email, or you can arrange a Zoom call, or whatever you want to do. And then attempt the exercise, and then share the results of the exercise with each other, and get feedback and give feedback, and think about how you've done things differently to your colleagues. What does that mean? Do you have different ideas? Did you have different strategies, etc.? We then ask you to use the online forum, which we'll show again in a few minutes, to give both your thoughts about some questions that we've asked about how the exercise went, and to talk about any technical issues that you might have had, and to look out on those forums for if any of your colleagues or others have also had issues that you might have already seen and already solved. So we'll talk about that forum a bit more in a minute. We'll then have a second session, as I said, on Friday, where we'll do much the same thing. We'll reflect a bit on the first exercise, and then we'll set a second exercise, and the same drill. You talk with the other members of your group, attempt the exercise, compare your results. And for the second exercise, which is the annotation of a piece of text with geographical references, we will, at the end of next Monday, we'll download the results. Or a date to be specified if you're not watching the live version. We'll download the results of your exercise and create a small visualization to share with you later. And we'll do that through the forums as well. So that's basically how this works. It's mostly asynchronous. So if you're not watching this live, if you missed it at the 2 o'clock start and you watch it at 3 o'clock instead, that's absolutely fine. You can do exactly the same as you would do if you were watching it live. And most of the activities are activities that you do by following the session page and discussing with your colleagues, and then you check in with us. So we're not meeting, obviously, because this is 2020. We're not meeting in a classroom, but we're also not attempting to have a video call with everybody involved in it. For the November 2020 version of this, we've got almost 70 people signed up for this workshop. So even if we were all in one classroom, we wouldn't have a particularly useful conversation with everybody involved in that environment. So that's broadly how this workshop's going to work. We might just quickly introduce ourselves and say a bit about who we are and why we're running this sort of event. I should mention that this workshop, although Christopher and I are teaching it on this occasion, it was co-designed by us and our colleagues Jonathan Blaney and Naomi Wells in the School of Advanced Study. So they're responsible for some of the materials as well. So as I said, I'm Gabriel Bodard. I work in the Institute of Classical Studies and in the Digital Humanities Centre at the School of Advanced Study. And My work is basically at the intersection of digital methods and the study of the ancient world. And to some degree, the digital methods that we're talking about, text encoding being a very large part of that, aren't particularly unique to the ancient world. But to some degree, there are things which are particularly unique to it. So that's my background sort of comes from that angle. I'm a classicist by training, but I've worked in digital humanities for many years since getting my training in classics. And so actually one of my main focuses is specifically on text encoding for ancient documentary texts. So if that's something people are interested in, that's something we could talk more about at some point. Christopher.
Hi, yes, I'm Christopher Ohge. I'm the lecturer in digital approaches to literature at the Institute of English Studies at the University of London School of Advanced Study. And I've been working in text encoding for quite a long time. I got my PhD at Boston University in textual studies and focused on English literary texts, mostly 19th and 20th century American and English literature. But I started working for Melville's Marginalia Online, which is a virtual library of Herman Melville's existing and books that he was known to have owned, borrowed, or consulted. And while I was in graduate school, I started working for the Melville Electronic Library, which includes critical editions, digital critical editions of Herman Melville's books. And now I'm serving as the associate director of that project, and we're still working on text encoding. But more broadly speaking too, I work in digital humanities and digital approaches to literature. So this includes computational literary studies, which has involved Melville, but also Mark Twain. So before I came to London, I was an editor at the Mark Twain Papers and Project at the University of California, Berkeley, where I prepared print and digital editions of Mark Twain, including the last volume of Mark Twain's autobiography. But I also worked on born digital editing of letters and of other texts like journals. So I've quite an experience of text encoding, mostly in TEI XML, which we're not going to cover. But for the purposes of this workshop, we're trying to demonstrate the importance of the fundamentals of text encoding through the philosophy of markup, through the broadest range of applications that you can find for text encoding. So I'll hand it back over to Gabby to review our GitHub repository.
Yeah, thanks, Christopher. So the other thing I might just say very quickly, I mean, I imagine most people watching this have some idea what text encoding means, because that's why you've signed up. But from my perspective, and Christopher said a bit about what sort of text encoding he's involved with. From my perspective, text encoding is it's not something that's new to the digital medium. It's something that we've always done with texts. From the first people who transcribed texts that they found written on stone, so people who are called epigraphers. Who transcribe inscriptions, they have always tried to capture something of the appearance or the materiality of that text, as well as just the words that are in it. And that's a form of markup. That's a form of physical structural markup. So if you expand abbreviations in your text and you put a symbol in there, such as parentheses, to show that it's expanded, if you have characters missing or illegible at the end of a line, and you represent those characters with particular symbols to show that they're not as clear as the other characters on there, that is specifically that's markup that you're inserting in the text. As with if someone gives you a text to proofread and you underline part of it and put a comment in the margin saying this needs to be clarified, you're adding markup to their text in order to give them feedback on that. And if you're editing a literary text of the kind that Christopher tends to work on, if you have textual variants from different versions and different manuscripts of that text, and you make a comment saying, this is my reading, but here in the footnote are 2 other readings that previous editors or that other witnesses have offered, that again is markup in the text. So what we're doing when we're talking about digital markup is we're thinking of ways in which we can capture that information so they're not only visually represented on the page, but that can then be computationally processed in some way. And one of those ways is to create maybe slightly more dynamic, slightly more flexible visual representations of them. So with pop-up windows, where you can alternate between 2 versions of a text or things like that on a screen. But other ways are ways that you can leverage that content by indexing or other kinds of information which helps you to interpret and otherwise process that text. So so that's sort of what we mean by markup. It's inserting information in a second layer over the text. So we're transcribing the text in what we think we try to get as close as possible to the original text, and then a second layer of commentary, as it were, or annotation from the editor is the markup. And digital markup, as I say, is in its slightly different form because it's not only visual. We try to capture some of the semantics of what's being captured in there as well. So that's the theory behind what we're talking about. Let me pop up. This is the session page that you'll have seen. I know you'll have seen this because that's the only place you'll have found the link to this YouTube video. So this page gives the basic information on the session. Let me just enlarge that slightly. Some information about software to download, which I know some of you have done already. An outline of the session and some of the materials that we're going to be making available to you and expecting you to look at. So we're not in this video, we're not going to give you detailed tutorials and so forth, because those are more easily done with existing videos. So we have a video that Christopher made on the history of markup. We have a video on Markdown, which I think is also Christopher's. We have a video as an introduction to HTML, which is the encoding scheme behind all the web pages that you're looking at. And there are a couple of other pieces of material on there. There's Christopher's slides. There's an optional live Markdown demo. There's and then there's a couple of tutorials and cheat sheets that you might use for looking up Markdown and HTML information to as a reference document. We then have an exercise that we suggest you try, and Christopher will describe this in more detail in a minute. We have some discussion questions that come out of that exercise, and all of this, and then there's the second part of this, which we'll come to on Friday. So you can stop at this point when reading the page today. Then both for the discussion of the exercise and for any other technical help you might need, we have a forum which you can find either from the links down there or from the issues button up here at the top of the page. And that takes you to this page where we've created 4 tickets which are basically forum channels for discussing or forum threads for discussing this topic. So in the first one, we have those same 5 questions that Christopher will talk to you about in a minute on the encoding exercise. And this is the channel in which we expect you to leave comments discussing some of those questions. So you don't have to answer the questions one by one, and they can be more general observations and discussions. Those are questions just to get you started, to get you thinking. But participating in this forum discussion is very much the most important part of your participation in this workshop. If you don't participate in this at all, it's as if you had turned up to a workshop that we offered in a room and you sat in silence at the back of the room the whole time, refusing to interact with anyone else in the room, which listening to us talking is the least important part of a workshop like this, right? It's your interaction with each other and with us that is going to make this valuable for you. And we've created another ticket here for technical help with the exercise, and I particularly want to ask you all to look at this ticket, this thread, even if you haven't come across any issues that you want to ask about yourself, but because other people may have, and it may be that you had to try 3 or 4 times to get something working, and you didn't think that was a big deal. You didn't feel the need to ask for help with it. Someone else has tried also half a dozen things, but the one thing they didn't try was the thing that worked for you, and so you could potentially help them answer that question. So that's the discussion forum we have in there, and I think that's all I need to say about the wiki page. If I think of anything else, we'll come back to it again afterwards. But I think we're good there. Christopher, do you want to talk a bit about the exercise in a bit more detail? You're still muted, Christopher.
That always happens, doesn't it? Okay, right. So for the first exercise, we want you to attempt at doing a very basic encoding of a not so basic text. The example that we're giving you is purposefully challenging for several reasons. Probably the first and the most important reason is that there's no right way to encode this text. We'll have you looking at the Dunciad, Alexander Pope's The Dunciad, and this happens to be the Dunciad B text, which was the second and final version of the Dunciad, which is a mock heroic poem about the crowning of the king of dullness. But the poem has its own dullness too, according to some at least, because it is something of a typographical satire of a scholarly edition itself, because in addition to being a poem in mock heroic couplets, it also has textual apparatus. And for those of you who know some scholarly editing, a textual apparatus or contextual apparatus, these are two very important features of any critical edition. And this poem is making fun of that convention by having contextual footnotes and imitations with cross-references to other poems and other people and other events and places. So as you can already imagine, I hope, there are lots of ways in which you can encode information about people, places, other texts, cross-references, places, and so on. This B text of 1743 is also interesting because it was the last version of Pope's Dunciad. He had started it in 1728, and it existed in several versions. So it is a kind of fluid text, and what we're looking at is an example from the 1743, which is the B text again, and the last stage, if you will, of this fluid text. So for now, what we'll be doing is asking you to encode this text to try to represent as best as you can the page. And if you scroll down to the exercise instructions, the way that you'll do that is first, we'll just want you to download the example page here on the GitHub repository. And this just gives you a JPEG file of the page from the Dunciad. We'd like you to transcribe that. And as you're doing this, have a conversation with your group about this document. What kinds of challenges are you noticing in a document like this, which has all kinds of features like running heads, asterisks, line numbers? What kinds of elements might be worth encoding? How might you represent this apparatus here, remarks versus imitations? What kinds of elements are worth attending to? How might you attend to them? And then finally, we want you to have a go at encoding the page first in Markdown. I emphasize first because after you see these introductory videos, I hope you'll notice that Markdown is the first step in a series of steps of encoding and publishing a digital text. So we'll have you looking at the Markdown in the Atom text editor, which is our preferred text editor. I'll share my page here. This is where you can find the Atom text editor. This is my favorite text editor. It's what we'll be using in this workshop. And the reason why we like this is that it's integrated into GitHub, which is also the source of our workshop repository. But it's also a very flexible and useful text editor with a lot of important features and extra packages that are particularly good for previewing Markdown. I'll get to that in a second, but first I'll show you that there are other alternative softwares that you can use. Visual Studio Code is a backup. If any of you are having problems with Atom, you can use Visual Studio Code. It was developed for Microsoft machines, but it works well on Mac as well. And this also has some of the previewing features for Markdown that we'll be using. And then finally, if you'd prefer just to use a web-based product, you can use the Dillinger Markdown Preview application. And this, of course, just gives you an editing window where you can type in your Markdown, like so, free text. And it shows in the preview here, and it has export features that are very handy into HTML, back into Markdown, or into PDF. So those are your three text editor options. Now, if I'll just go into Atom itself, I want you to take note of the fact that once you have Atom installed, if you choose to go with Atom, we'll want you to download an additional package called Markdown Preview Advanced. And I'll just go through with you how to do that. You'll want to click on Atom, the Atom menu, and then go to Preferences. I believe it's Settings if you're in Windows. Then you will navigate to the Install button. And then in Search Packages, you just start typing in Markdown Preview Enhanced. And there you can see the package. I already have it installed, so I don't need to do anything, but you would just install this package, and then you would be able to go back to your Markdown file once you have it ready, and by selecting or typing in Control-Shift-M, you then get a fancy Markdown preview with notes and all. And then you'll be able to download this as HTML by simply right-clicking on the preview, selecting HTML offline, and it'll give you the path to your HTML file. And then you'll be able to open that up in your browser, and there's your Markdown file rendered in HTML. You could also open this file in your in your Atom text editor, and you'd be able to edit the raw HTML as well. So once you have done all of that, we'll then ask you to go through the discussion questions. And these questions are largely geared toward your reflections on the gains and losses of encoding a text in Markdown, and then trying to do some additional things to it in HTML. So first of all, we want to hear from you about whether it's a good idea to start with Markdown. Is Markdown better suited than HTML, or is there any kind of difference between the two? And then we want you to think about some of the aspects of the text that you would like to encode that Markdown and HTML won't let you do. Now, that's really important because Markdown and HTML are very constrained. Markdown is simply a way of authoring in HTML in a simple way, and HTML has a very limited tag set. So there might be some features of the text that HTML doesn't cover. What kinds of features might those be? How might you add them? And then we want you to think about display. So if you're looking at again, this type of page here, like the Dunciad, do you need to focus on complete accuracy? Do you need to represent every single aspect of this document? Documentary editors will tell you that it's their job to render a physical document as faithfully as possible, but every documentary editing project also can't do everything. So what things can be sacrificed and for what cost? And then finally, think about audience. And think about the decisions you make in your encoding project about your audience. So Gabby mentioned earlier that when you're text encoding, you're thinking about things like indexing your scholarly annotations. But you might also be thinking too about what kinds of analysis tools your encoding might be used for. Or is it simply just a project that is going to display a bunch of text and then render it searchable? That might be your only goal, and that's fine. But some people might want to chuck all of their encoded text into Python and run natural language processing, or render it as a word cloud in Voyant tools, or do a corpus analysis in a tool like AntConc. You know, what kinds of analytical mechanisms would you like to use with this particular encoded text? And I think once we get through those questions and discussions, it will facilitate a nice transition into our second session on annotation, which will get into more details about encoding certain types of entities in a semantic way and visualizing them. So I think that covers everything in the discussion. Gabby, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I don't think so. Only that yeah, discussion. As I say, the discussion questions are there to get you started. Feel free to discuss any other aspect of text encoding and of the exercise in that forum thread. And if there's something that you're not sure whether this is a discussion topic or a help topic, because there are some things which are going to be kind of in between the two or a bit of both, then don't worry too much about which forum you put it in. Either one, it'll be found. So so I think that's fine. But yes, you do use the forums. I think that's quite important. But also discuss with your colleagues in groups. If you're following this video as part of one of the School of Advanced Study workshops that we've run using this, either the original one in November 2020 or one of the later ones that we're going to run using the same materials, then you should have before starting this, you should have been assigned into groups by us. You should have received an email from us recently assigning you into a group with a bunch of other people's addresses in it for you to contact. If you haven't received such an email, and you would have expected to because you signed up to one of these workshops, then do drop us an email or contact us through the forum or however best to get in touch with us, and we'll get you signed up with a group of other people to do that work and to do that discussion. And as always, if there are any other urgent technical or administrative questions, feel free to drop us an email. We would much rather that you contact via the forum, because it's almost guaranteed that if you have an issue you want to ask about, someone else has as well and hasn't asked it yet. But if it's something which obviously isn't a general question, technical question that everybody might want to ask and know your answer to, or if it's something that you need to be private for whatever reason, then obviously feel free to drop us an email instead. Yeah.
Great. Are there any? Should we see if there are any questions in the chat?
I haven't seen anything in the chat.
Okay.
Yet. If anyone does have any questions, feel free to pop them in the live chat box, which is either to the right of this video over there, or below it, depending on what device you're watching this on. But as I say, that only applies on the at 4:30 p.m. on Monday, the 23rd of November 2020. If you're watching this at any other time or day, that live chat feature will not be up anymore. We will see you again in another one of these videos on which we will be giving on Friday. If you're not watching live, then of course you don't need to wait 4 days to watch the next one, although I suggest you do the exercises in between before you do so. And I hope we'll see many of you in the forums in between times. Great. The comments we're seeing in the chat so far are all people saying that it's good so far, which great. We're happy.
Oh, there is one question about the Markdown package. Yes, it's called Markdown Preview Enhanced. I could show that again, just to be clear.
Yeah, why don't you?
So again, we'd go to Install Packages, and it's Markdown Preview Enhanced. There it is. And the reason why I suggest this is that it allows for things like enabling footnotes and exports, and also kind of makes the preview look a little nicer than the standard package. But Atom does come with a default Markdown preview feature, but not all Markdown is translated.
Yeah. I would add that if anybody did miss any part of this video for whatever reason, somebody said their internet hung briefly while they were watching this. As soon as we finish this broadcast in a couple of minutes, this will be a video on YouTube like any other. So you can rewind to the part you missed and watch it again or whatever. And some of the things that you're asking will be explained in the support videos that we've linked to on the session page. I just want to say we have one question from Daria, which I think is a perfect question for the forum. So if you don't mind, I won't answer it now. I think that's something that is exactly a question that you should all be thinking about. And you'll be neither the first nor the last person to struggle with whether the long Latin S should be a separate character or not. So let's have that conversation on the forum. Yes, Christopher, if you use the backup tool, the VS Code tool, do you need to install the Markdown package on that as well, or does that come?
No, it has a default package that behaves like the Markdown Preview Enhanced.
Presumably with a different shortcut, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as I said, Dillinger is another very good option.
Yeah.
If you're having trouble with any of the text editing softwares.
Yeah. Great. Okay, great. I think there'll be a lot of discussion on the forums, and we look forward to it. And we'll see you again on Friday.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Bye.